Great. We are also live on our YouTube channel now.
Great.
So I think we are just a minute away from starting the session, and I think I'll just start off with a brief introduction. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our day 3 of Exploring Majors webinar series and to the second webinar for the day, which is on psychology. I welcome all the I welcome all the counselors, educators, students, and parents. And I give a very warm welcome to Professor Sciutto, who is a psychology professor at Muhlenberg College in Allentown, and Muhlenberg is one of the Next Geniuses partner college. Professor Mark has been a very distinguished teacher at Muhlenberg, who's also been awarded and has been teaching various subjects in psychology, say development and assistant psychology, advanced research, and much more. So before that, here's a little about Next Genius. Since I mentioned that Muhlenberg is one of Next Genius's partner college, we help students win full tuition scholarships at our prestigious institutions for their undergraduate education. So please visit our website and feel free to register. All right. Okay, so without any further ado, I would like to give it over to Professor Mark for taking ahead the session. Thank you.
I can share my screen, is that right?
Yes, definitely.
And are you seeing the PowerPoint now?
Yes, it's I can see it.
Okay, great. Well, thank you all for coming. I look forward to exchanging some information and getting your questions, and hopefully you leave today with a good sense of what psychology is and what psychology is like at Muhlenberg in particular. As Devika said, my name is Dr. Mark Sciutto. I've been at Muhlenberg for about 20 years. My area of psychology is clinical and school psychology. So I work with children and adolescent mental health issues, in particular, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder and autism spectrum disorders. I'm very interested in research in those areas. And what I want to do is walk you through a little bit about the field itself, because I think if you're going to think about psychology as a major, you want to have a sense of the broader discipline, and then talk a little bit about what the psychology look like at Muhlenberg, and then we'll walk through what some of our alumni are currently doing and so forth, and hopefully we have plenty of time for questions at the end. So if we think about psychology, when you say psychology to people, most people think of mental health and the clinical aspects of psychology, and that's the area that I'm involved in. Obviously, I'm very partial to that area. I'm very passionate about that. But psychology really is an incredibly diverse field. It's the scientific study of human behavior. And so that happens in a whole bunch of ways. So developmental psychologists are studying progression basically from cradle to grave, from birth through adulthood and aging, and the changes that happen over the course of our lifetime. Neuropsychology and biopsych and neuroscience related fields study biological influences on behavior. Industrial organizational psychologists study the application of psychological principles in a business organizational framework. Sports psychologists study the applications of psychology to performance and motivation and other issues in sports, and so on down the line. Educational psychologists, cognitive psychologists, forensic psychologists, applications of psychology to the law. So basically, what I often say to prospective students and to parents is that psychology is fundamentally about the study of human behavior. And so it is really useful in any context in which you want to understand human behavior, right? And so it really works well with other disciplines. It really works well no matter almost what field you go into. It's kind of hard to imagine a field in which you wouldn't want to have a better understanding of human behavior, how people behave in groups, how people interact with information. Even some of the most solitary professions like programming or computer-based or sort of financial kinds of things where you're dealing very heavily with numbers, it involves some understanding of how people process information, how people engage with information. So the study of psychology is incredibly diverse, and you can pursue psychology in a whole range of ways that are not mental health, right? So I think that's the misconception about the field, is that it's just about mental health. If we look at the American Psychological Association, one of the major organizations for professionals in psychology, they define a couple core areas of psychology that was developed, and we adhere to this at Muhlenberg. But basically, in almost any field that you go to, any school that you go to and study psychology, these are some of the core skill areas that you're going to develop in a major for psychology. And first and foremost is a capacity for scientific inquiry and critical thinking. We want you to think, and I'll come back more to this later, we want you to think like scientists, regardless of whether you want to go on and do research or scientific applications of psychology. We want you to think that way because there's a fundamental benefit to being able to think like a researcher and to be able to analyze human behavior and problems in a critical fashion. And so much of what we do is founded around this this issue of being able to ask questions scientifically and investigate questions scientifically. The field itself also has a really extensive knowledge base. Psychology is a relatively new discipline, but has been around for some time and has developed a very extensive knowledge base. So many of the things that are around you right now, from the way you interface with your computer on Zoom right now, or to the way you study, to the way you interact with others in the workplace, what works well. All of those things really have some foundation in psychological research and in ways that you're often not aware of the direct connection. Psychology also, as a discipline, also places a real emphasis on understanding our ethical and social responsibility in the world. So with an understanding of human behavior comes the importance of taking that understanding and applying it to make the world a better place, to understand how things like political unrest or things like racism, things like sexism come into play in the world around us and what to do about it. Right. So right now we're really immersed in a climate in which people are sort of yelling at each other and just sort of not necessarily having conversations. And psychology has a lot to teach us about how to understand issues of conflict and issues of social responsibility and social justice and things like that. In the major, across places, not just at Muhlenberg, there's a heavy emphasis on communication, right? And so one of the fundamental skills that you're going to get in almost any psych program is the ability to communicate effectively in writing or orally, because that is really essential no matter what application of psychology you come into. And then ideally a core skill area in any program is also going to help you find a pathway for professional development, to develop the personal and professional skills that help you succeed. One of the things that I'll emphasize is the job you have 10 years from now may not even exist right now. And I'll show you some examples of alumni where that was the case. So what the discipline does, and I think what we do well at Muhlenberg, is if you have a foundation in these core skill areas, you're prepared to adapt no matter what the future holds for you. So the job that you end up in 10 years from now might not even exist right now, but if you're a good critical thinker, good scientific inquiry, you have an understanding of the fundamental processes of human behavior, and you're able to apply that in an ethically and socially responsible way, you are really well suited no matter what the future holds for you. What about at Muhlenberg? So what's different, or what's unique, or what's distinctive about psychology at Muhlenberg? And we come at the study of psychology through our main philosophy, which is informed engagement. We want students to take what they're learning in psychology and use it to engage with the world around them. We want you to take what you're learning in psychology and take it out and make the world a better place, and engage with your community, engage with the broader community in ways that reflect that understanding of human behavior. Likewise, we want it to go the other direction. We want you to be out in the world, take from your community and bring it in and help us learn about human behavior, right? So we want you to bring what's outside of the classroom in and what's inside of the classroom out. What we do best is, when we're doing it best, is when the boundaries of the classroom are kind of blurred, right? So where you stop seeing this is a psychology class and you start seeing it as a part of studying the world as a whole. So what do we do as a major? So there's a couple core principles. As I alluded to earlier, scientific inquiry is the foundation. So you're going to do a lot of research-based experiences in the major, even if you never want to go on and do research. We place a really heavy emphasis on understanding the research process and the scientific process, a way of understanding human behavior. And that serves our students really well, even those, and perhaps especially those that go on in fields that aren't really research-based or aren't necessarily directly research-related. We also place a high emphasis on high-impact practices. This is a higher education term. So things that really tend to transform students' experiences. And I may want to think that after you take one of my classes that you're going to remember what we talked about in class for 10 years, 15 years, 20 years. That would be great. The reality is most college students, when they leave the classroom, they don't necessarily remember the details about what they learned in a specific class, but they do remember experiences. And so what we really try to do throughout the major is give you these sort of high impact experiences that will stick with you into your professional life and throughout your career development. So things like community-based learning. We have a number of classes where the students are working in the community as part of their learning experience. One of my classes, developmental psychopathology, we're learning about children's mental health issues, autism, conduct problems, ADHD. And as part of the class, students are working for 2 to 3 hours a week with children in the local community schools who are on the autism spectrum or experiencing emotional challenges. And so what they're learning in class is real because it's around them and they're doing it as part of the class. We have another class where students are taking a course alongside inmates at a local correctional facility, and they're learning about the criminal justice system. We have a class where students are learning about poverty, risk, and resilience, and they're working in an after-school program in one of our local schools. And so our emphasis is really not, sort of learning purely the facts and figures of psychology, but we want you to sort of see how that is reflected in the world around you. So we have a lot of community-based learning courses. We have a really heavy emphasis on undergraduate research. Students are involved in research from their sophomore level at the latest, all the way through the senior level. I'll talk about the curriculum in a few minutes. And then we try to provide a number of unique experiences, allowing students to do something with their degree in psychology, do something with their learning in psychology in ways that are really transformational in ways. And I'll talk a little bit about some of that stuff as we go on. One of the other things you'll see as a hallmark of our program is that we really have a heavy priority on student-faculty collaborations. And if you look, this is available on our website, but if you look at this, you'll see, I'll bring this up quick. This is just a list of recent publications and presentations. See if I can make that bigger for you to see. There we go. Publications and presentations with faculty and students collaborating, right? And so what you'll see here, all the names in red are student co-authors on presentations. And you'll see some through here with the caret symbol here that are publications with student co-authors. So you'll see that students are really active participants with our faculty and getting involved with research in a very meaningful way, so to the point that they're frequently co-authors on papers and presentations. So I encourage you to visit our website. You'll see a little bit more description of each of these things, the sort of 4 pillars of what we're talking about. We want our faculty are very engaged, deeply engaged in both the field and in our students' learning. We want to challenge and push you. We want you to sort of think differently and explore the world in ways that you haven't thought about before, so that at the end of 4 years, you come out as a more engaged and informed person. You're viewing the world through the lens of psychology. We want you to work actively in research. There's a lot of research collaboration, as I mentioned. And we do have some of the some amazing teachers. We have a number of faculty members who have won teaching awards and are really sort of nationally renowned for their scholarship and so forth. And so I think we have that small school experience, liberal arts experience, but that gives you some of the benefits of exposure to sort of world-class faculty. All right, so what does the major look like? If I'm going to walk you through sort of what a curriculum would look like over 4 years, of course, everyone starts with Introduction to Psychology, Psych 101, that's our foundational course. You get a quick overview of the discipline and the field. And so you'll sample all those different areas of psychology that I mentioned at the very beginning, developmental psychology, neuroscience, social psychology, clinical psychology, and so forth. Because we have such a foundation on scientific inquiry and research, the sort of the next level of required courses are statistics and research methods, and students will take a full course in statistics, a full course in research methods, with the understanding that we are preparing you for thinking like a researcher. So students take stat course or research methods course. They also take a statistics course in the math department before they take our statistics course. So we want you to really be well-grounded in the methodology that scientists and psychology use. Beyond that core foundation, we want you to get a sample of, we want you to get some breadth as well as depth. And so we want you to get a sample of the different broad areas of psychology. So every student has to take courses in one of these 4 areas. So you have to take at least one course in each of these areas. One area, for example, biological, behavioral, and cognitive, you're going to get an exposure to sort of those fundamental processes of behavior, biological processes. So the courses on the bottom here that are not bolded are sort of 200 level courses. They're sophomore-ish level courses, sophomore maybe into junior level. They're the first level of content courses. They don't require much of a background other than the foundation that's below it, the stats and methods. The courses that are bolded here are upper level courses that allow a student to get more depth. So in each area, we want you to get some breadth and some depth. And so you might take a course in biological psychology at the 200 level, and then at the 300 level, take a follow-up course in psychopharmacology that builds on that. Or you might take a course in cognitive processes at the 200 level and take an upper level seminar in memory and amnesia at that level. The next area is sociocultural processes. And again, we have some 200 level courses here like social psychology. Biological psychology should be taken out of there. That's a typo. Social psychology at the 200 level, and you might follow up with it on an upper level course of contemporary racism. Or you might take a multicultural psychology and take an upper level course in psychology of women. So you have to take at least one course in each of these 4 areas, but you can take multiple courses. In developmental processes, you're going to have 200 level courses such as adolescent development, child development. You'll take upper level courses in inclusion or exclusion, poverty, risk, and resilience, and so forth. And then in clinical and applied psychology, you might take a 200 level course in something like abnormal psychology, where you learn about mental health issues, and you might take an upper level course in my course like developmental psychopathology, where we deal with upper level content in child mental health issues. So you're going to take one course in each of those 4 areas. Ideally, you're going to build on top of that some of those unique experiences like internships, research collaborations with faculty. And then our culminating experience is what we call our Q course. Every student has to do either an advanced research seminar or a senior thesis. And these are really, the seminars are 1 semester long experiences that attempt to pull together, integrate the things that you've done across the major. The senior thesis is a year-long project where the student does their own individual research project under the supervision of a faculty member. And these often pan out into larger projects. For instance, I had a student recently who did her thesis on OCD stigma, obsessive compulsive disorder stigma. Did such a fantastic job. We spent the following summer after she graduated condensing her thesis, and it was published in the Journal of Obsessive Compulsive and Related Disorders. And so from the introductory course, so you get to that culminating undergraduate experiences, you have the potential to really develop both the knowledge base and the skills to conduct an independent project on your own that results in a peer-reviewed publication. So that's kind of our goal, is to give you the capacity in our curriculum to do that. Where do our students go? I'll walk you through a little bit, tell you a few sort of anecdotes about alumni, but because the field is so diverse, our students go off in all different directions. And so I often get questions from parents or prospective students, what can I do with a degree? The answer is almost anything. And that's not, I don't say that lightly, because our majors really have gone on in a whole bunch of directions. And I tried to cluster them here just to give you a sense of the types of fields, sort of the types of pathways that our students go into. The most common, I think, is probably healthcare systems, but even within that area, you're going to see people, students like Carrie, who came out and got his PsyD and is practicing a sort of traditional clinical psychology background. He has a full-time private practice. He does a lot of really great stuff with ADHD. To Miles Davison, who worked with a variety of community agencies, but went through a social work pathway, as did Melissa Martin. Now, Melissa is working with Alzheimer's and dementia population, so an aging population. Alyssa Brief is an occupational therapist. We have students that go into nursing. We have students that go into physical therapy, speech and language therapy, all sorts of things. So anything in the healthcare field, for the most part, there are applications of psychology, and psychology prepares you well for graduate study in each of those. We have a lot of pre-med students who also either take a substantial number of psych courses or major in psych as well. We have a lot of students go into some sort of legal application of psychology, right? So some are practicing law, like Brianna and Nikki, Kristen Dilks, who are very successful in sort of law practice. We have some that go into law enforcement, like Kristen Bosky, who's a credit to the New Jersey State Troopers. He's a great example of how he's taken his understanding of the kinds of issues in psychology and has really brought it into the nature of his work in a field that really needs that kind of understanding. And then Sandra DeGeorge is working for the U.S. Department of Justice. So we have everything from law enforcement to sort of legal practice for students in psychology, and then a whole bunch of a whole range of applications in business. Students like Nikki and Jessica, who have gone into industrial organizational psychology and are serving, doing consulting or HR related applications. To Andrea, who went into accounting, and Marin, who is the director of training and operations at Solomon Page. So students with a psychology background often succeed in business, and they often do really well because they have those fundamental skills that transfer well into a business environment. There's a real need for people who understand motivation, group behavior, diversity, and the kinds of things that psychologists spend their time thinking about. So those translate really well into a business environment. Probably the second most common pathway is education. We have a lot of students that go into education in some way, but again, end up in very different fields. So some go into school psychology, like Erin Herman. Amanda Palmer is a great example. She went into special education, was practicing that for 10 years in a school at American University. And she just recently, within the past 2 years or so, went back to get her doctorate at Johns Hopkins in urban education. And so she's a great example of, she was coming right out of school, applying her psychology degree. She had a joint program with psychology and education, and it has inspired her to go back and at a later time go for more advanced education. But we have school counselors, we have those involved in higher education, like Maddie and Tatiana and Dom. They're all working in education systems in some way. We have a number of students that go into sort of nonprofit and public service sectors. Mike Schlossberg was a double major, poli-sci and psychology. Actually, quite a few of the people up here, probably too many to mention, are double majors or major and minor. One of the strengths of Muhlenberg is that liberal arts education allows you to really dip your toe in a number of disciplines and really get depth in several disciplines if you want. But Mike was a poli-sci and psych major. He's now one of our local representative, comes back to speak to students all the time. Julie Klein worked with the National Alliance for Homelessness for probably 7 or 8 years, and then went back to get her degree in public policy at the University of Michigan. Alex Ripken is has worked in a series of nonprofits. And so we have students that are taking, again, the understanding of human behavior and their passion for understanding how to do it well, how to understand behavior and make a difference. And they're bringing that out into the world around them. We have a number of students that do decide to go on and do a research in career in research in academia. and often in surprising ways, right? So Ben Solomon despised research methods and statistics when he took it as a major. And it wasn't until his senior year when he got involved in a research project with me that he started to get a little bit of the bug for research. And he went on to get a Ph.D. in school psychology at the University of Massachusetts, and has now become a really established and prominent researcher who focuses on methodology. So the very thing that I think he despised as a sophomore in college, he's now developed an expertise in. Katie Ferris is doing some really amazing work at the University of Chicago with STEM education for kids. Katie was a great example of a student who was always a good student, did great at research, discovered through some of our community-based experiences that she wanted to make a difference in the schools with children, but not necessarily in a direct service kind of way. So she discovered by working with children in the schools that she could make a big difference by focusing on the program kinds of issues rather than necessarily one-to-one service things. Miriam published an article with me while she was an undergraduate, and she's now gone on and has done some amazing work with health psychology and obesity and eating behavior. So there's a lot of examples. Oops, sorry. And then some non-traditional pathways, and there are really a lot of these. But you know, we have some examples. AJ Barnold, I always point to. He went on and got a master's in sports psychology after he graduated from Muhlenberg, and did some assistant coaching for soccer teams while teaching adjunct. He taught a sports psychology course for us. But he started applying the statistical understanding that he got in psychology and applying it to soccer. Right at that point, there wasn't a lot of analytics work in soccer. And so he had a combination, this rare combination of coaching experience, psychology training, and statistical understanding. And that made him really attractive for teams. And so he went very quickly from a Division III coaching position to Division I coaching position. He's now a performance analyst for the US women's soccer team. Got to go to the World Cup in France, and he's one of the people doing the analysis of everything from training to performance to in-game behavior. And he will be the first person to tell you, when he was an undergrad and he was studying psychology, he did not know, this job didn't exist. And he had no sense that this is where he would end up. But because he had such a solid foundation in all of those skills, he was able to pivot and move and follow the opportunities when they came. Matt Stovall is another interesting example, double major in Spanish and psychology, and had a sort of passion for language and understanding human behavior across cultures. Decided to go into the military, and he served as did an intensive training as an Arab linguist interpreter for the National Guard, and he's now gone back also, as you see a pattern, to a graduate program in public policy, wanting to take that experience that he learned and apply it on a bigger level. So our students don't always go into this sort of traditional pathways that you would think of when you think of psychology, but anywhere you are engaging with other people, anywhere where you want to understand the impact of human behavior on the community, a foundation in psychology is really, really valuable. And I think our alumni speak volumes to that. So hopefully that gives you a sense that what you're getting in a degree in psychology is really that fundamental foundation: how to think about behavior systematically, how to think about behavior scientifically, how to ask good questions, and then how to take that understanding and apply it to real world situations. And we really try to give you a foundation at the undergraduate level that you can go on and do whatever you want beyond that. Most students will, for what they want to do, they will want to go on to get advanced study. But as you'll see with some of the people that I talked about, they don't do that right away necessarily. Some will go right in out of undergraduate. Some will wait. They'll work in the field for a while and then find the specific pathway they want to pursue. Our goal as an undergraduate institution is to make sure that if you want to go into a PhD program, or you want to go into a PsyD program, or you want to work in the field, that we have given you the fundamental skills and understanding of yourself to make that next step. And I'm happy to take some